Alright, so I've seen a handful of comments about this, and I wanted to address it in the fairest way possible that I can. And that is the new expansion for Guild Wars 2, The Secrets of the Obscure, is it worth purchasing if you are a new player? I'm going to go over a list of the pros and then the cons and give you the most information that you can have at your disposal to make an educated decision, basically.
Nice.
I'll also include my final opinion at the end, so stay tuned, listen in. And now, granted, I will say I don't know any more than you do, so if you've been following a lot of the press and all the new forum posts and everything about that, then you are pretty much up to date, but I'm just going to look at it more of a strategic angle, actually. Okay, so first, let's go ahead and talk about the pros. The pros for purchasing this expansion, of course, right out of the gate, the big one that I'm going to highlight because this is a big issue with a lot of players, is the streamlined ability to get the sky scale. So for those of you who don't know, Guild Wars 2 has two flying mounts. They have the sky scale and then the griffin. The sky scale is more difficult than the griffin to acquire. The griffin just requires a lot of gold. And in Secrets of the Obscure, they have explained that they are going to make this a streamlined feature that you can unlock for your account, which of course the sky scale is the pinnacle of mounts within Guild Wars 2, so it kind of makes sense. And also, if you base it off of what they're looking to have as far as the expansion zones and where you're going to be, it seems like you're going to need to fly quite a bit. So this kind of makes sense. Now you're having a sky scale, one of the flying mounts, and arguably the helicopter, not the overpowered glider that is the Griffin, to be able to stay afloat and go where you need to. So that's a pretty cool feature, especially as a new player, because once you have the sky scale, you'll be able to essentially handle every other piece of content that Guild Wars 2 has in open world, mainly, without issue. It makes it a lot easier. Now, to play devil's advocate, I don't know how much this streamlined method is going to be. I do know that if you go through Living World Season 4, like I've recently done on stream, it does take quite a bit of time if you are just picking away at it. If you dedicate yourself to knocking it out as quickly as possible, you can probably get it knocked out in a couple of days, maybe a week if you're really sandbagging it. But really what you run into is just some limitations of like what you can do and how much of certain materials you need. That's the current way to unlock the sky scale. And I don't know necessarily if it's going to be easier or faster, but I am hopeful that if they're making an expansion that seems like you are flying quite a bit and you're up in the air, that they give you a mount to do so, right?
Wait, that's illegal.
And the other big pro that I've noticed, and this is one that I think a lot of players are very excited about, and that is the open world legendary items that you can get. So for those of you who don't know, legendary gear is essentially the best gear in game that you can get. It has the same stat values as like ascended gear. They're exactly the same, identical. However, the legendary gear can be mixed and matched and put everywhere. So for example, if you complete the legendary rifle Predator, every character who can use a rifle on your account has access to that legendary item, which is, again, the highest stat value possible. You can change the stats on whim. You can change the look of the rifle. You can change all of its infusions and its sigils, all these other features, essentially at free will, and you don't have to pay any extra gold. Ascended, if you want to change these things, it usually comes at a cost. Legendary gear is essentially a grind for quality of life. Previously, before this expansion announcement, the only ways that you could get legendary gear, so your head, your shoulders, your hands, your chest, your legs, and then of course your boots, those 6 slots, you had to either participate in PvP, World versus World, or join a raid group and grind those out. I've heard that raiding is actually a little bit faster as far as grinding that stuff out. In my opinion, PvP is more fun, but again, that's kind of, you know, at your own will, right? But what is exciting about this new expansion is that when they are offering these new legendary items that you can earn by just playing an open world, this gives the more casual player, the player who doesn't want to deal with a whole bunch of group content and a lot of different, we'll say, farming methods within that particular content. it gives them essentially a way to earn this like coveted piece of gear, this coveted level, without having to really need a bunch of other players to do it. Now, again, before everyone else says it, Guild Wars 2 is an MMORPG.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
You are essentially there to play with other players. So that does kind of scale back on that sense. But one of the biggest selling points for Guild Wars 2 is, of course, their open world. They are heavy on having all these multiple dynamic events happening all over the place, map-wide metas, all these things that roll into this like discovery sense. And it does make sense that now you have an expansion that is offering some of the best gear in game, achievable basically by doing its best feature, which is open world. So I guess in my thought, yeah, that does make sense. And the last big pro that I can really identify, and I would say, is that you are essentially riding the high of the entire community jumping into this new expansion. I don't know if you've ever played a MMO where you didn't join in right as the new expansion came out. You came in 4 or 5 months later, and it was probably still exciting. It was probably still fun. But there's nothing like joining the new expansion on the first day and seeing just the rush of players, seeing all the people interacting with each other. It's a lot of fun. And if you're purchasing this expansion, or pre-purchasing in this sense, you essentially are able to be there at the forefront of when all of this new content rolls out and experience it with the community at the same time. That's a really cool feature, honestly, and I think that's something that's worth mentioning. Also, I'm not quite sure how Guild Wars 2 will be handling their additional stories tied to each of the expansions. I don't know if they're going to be like living worlds. I don't think they are, but the idea of you purchasing this new expansion is that any additional story content that they are adding on, you will have access to. As they expand this story for the Secrets of the Obscure, every time a new mission comes out, every time a new story chapter comes out, you have access to it. You're able to just jump in and play, which is awesome. That's a fantastic feature, because the alternative is that if you aren't there when it initially comes out, for the most part, you'll have to pay gems or gold to gems, or just pay the money to unlock that particular piece of content.
What the hell is even that?
So essentially, you were right there at the cusp of the next story coming through. And even if you only play casual, as long as you log in, it's like a month. You have a month to log in sometime where that story mission has been made available to get credit for it, even if you don't play it right then. Essentially, you get it, you grabbed it, you're holding on to it, and it's good. So those are my pros. But before I move on, I wanted to see, what are your thoughts about Secrets of the Obscure? Do you think it's worth buying pre-purchase? What do you think? Tell me down below. This is more of a quality of life thing, but once you have the sky scale, essentially you use that for most things. It's kind of slow, but it is able to essentially climb every surface that you can think. It can go everywhere. I think that if you are just purchasing Secrets of the Obscure, you do kind of miss out on the rest of the mounts that Path of Fire brings. Yes, I will stress that the sky scale can essentially cover most of what the core mounts can do, but there is something to be said about using a skimmer across the water, or perhaps even a roller beetle on open terrain, because the roller beetle is significantly faster than the sky scale. The griffin can be faster than the sky scale. And of course, even the expansion, we'll say elite specializations that kind of go with it, there's a lot going on for Path of Fire, and there's a lot of positive things that go into that. Now, carrying that even further, if you go ahead and say, look at Living World Season 4, that has, without a doubt, the best story in the game. In my opinion, it is the best story in the game. It is so cool. It's such a great instance, and that's all I'll say. I won't spoil nothing for you.
What are you doing?
But I guess my point being is that if you are getting this new Secrets of the Obscure, essentially you're not given the rest of the mounts. And you're not given anything other than, I believe it's just the baseline Raptor, and I've heard about the Springer, but that's about it. But you don't get to build off of those masteries. You have to purchase Path of Fire. And again, they are incorporating what I believe this new map to essentially be able to focus strictly on what the sky scale can do. So that is something to consider. However, I will just have to say that it does kind of suck that you don't get the rest of the mounts. Another con that I can think of, and this might be a little bit more niched, but I covered it in the previous note, which was the story. Now, if you are jumping into, say, from I just tried out the free to trial, I'm in core Tyria, I'm doing all that, I'll buy the expansion. I'll buy the new expansion that's coming out because I want to be at the forefront. Essentially, you are missing 10 years worth of story, of instances, of zones, and things like that. That is kind of a downside, is because you're not going to be able to see what the story is, why we essentially got to where we were, who the hell Oreen is. Like, you're going to miss out on quite a bit of that. Now, there are some players who are out there who don't necessarily care about the story. I just want to get in and play. I don't need to know the backstory. I don't need to know why we're fighting dragons. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But again, there are plenty of players who just want to focus on the story. And I want to see what this story-driven game is about. And of course, once you get into Secrets of the Obscure, I don't know necessarily if they're going to do a whole recap to tell you, okay, this is what happened over the past 10 years. Okay, so my honest opinion, I do believe that it would be beneficial for new players to purchase this new expansion. Guild Wars 2 hasn't done a really good job of explaining, say, what is a dodge roll? What are boons? What are conditions? What's this resource that I have? Why do I keep going into downstate?
Good evening.
There's a lot going on with it, and we saw a glimmer of this kind of like teaching method starting to happen in End of Dragons, and I am hopeful that that will continue on. Now, granted, because Guild Wars 2 does require quite a bit of explaining, that gives me a job, we'll say. That gives me something to do. But it also is nice for those players who are just able to go in and just, okay, I want to figure it out. I want to just figure it out in game and grow from there. And that's respectable, and that's fantastic. And I'm hopeful that Guild Wars 2 will continue that trend of offering in-game better tutorials so that players necessarily aren't overwhelmed. And then, of course, even paired with that, of course, is getting that damn sky scale. The sky scale I recently just went through, and it took me about 13 weeks. And again, that was me just chipping away at it. I wasn't necessarily a dedicated farm on it. I wasn't busting my butt to get it. I would put in a couple of hours a week, and that's it. I took my time, and I was really slow. But it seems like there's a more streamlined method coming forward, and getting the sky scale is essentially going to make the rest of your exploration in the game as you purchase new expansions a heck of a lot easier. Because I do believe that ArenaNet is starting to look at it from the instance of a new player. There's a new story coming out, there's new players who are getting drawn to the game. Let's make it a little bit more palatable for them to come in and not necessarily feel like they're getting nickeled and dimed, having to buy every expansion just to make sure that they fit in, And overall, I think probably the biggest thing that is going to be your best investment as a new player getting into it is being where the players are. Having that experience, being up front with all these new faces, all these different characters, all these new players who are going to be in these zones that you're going to be playing, I feel that that is going to be a fantastic way for you to get introduced to the game. This community frickin' rocks. It is so damn good. And now you are essentially putting yourself into a position that you will be able to spend time with these people, talk with these people, so that you stick with the game. Because we love this game. This is one of our favorite games, if not our top focus. So being where they are going to be, you're setting yourself up for success. Personally, I'm going to pre-purchase the expansion. It also is because my channel is about Guild Wars 2, so it would be kind of weird if I didn't. But if you are considering purchasing, I made a community post not too long ago talking about all the ArenaNet partners. Now, these ArenaNet partner links will essentially allow you to purchase the expansion. It doesn't knock down the price. However, it does provide a little bit of kickback to the creators. I'm not a partner, so please, if you're going to purchase the expansion, use one of those links. It helps us all out. It helps us create for this great game. If you want to find out why everyone comes back to this damn game, click on this video here. Stay caffeinated, folks.